Welcome to part 3 of the Staff Hiring, Training, and Evaluation course of the Nonprofit Bootcamp e-learning series. Many small organizations face turnover of staff, find it hard to manage staff well, and are under-resourced in both time and money. Leaders who are able to write outcomes-based job descriptions, design simple and structured training, and conduct fair and effective evaluations can manage more smoothly and effectively. During each webinar, participants will hear key concepts, then develop a specific plan for one high-need role in their organization. Today's lesson is on conducting fair and effective evaluation. Avoid drama and complaints from staff and supervisors by basing performance evaluations on clear outcomes and effective training. Using the outcomes you worked on in part 1, or a sample, we will build a format for evaluation that sets staff and supervisors on a clear path right from the start. This path raises your chances for productive and satisfied workers and reduces misunderstandings and turnover. Today's presenter is Peggy Silva, Principal of Consulting for Community. Peggy will be leading the outcomes-based HR course and brings 30-plus years of experience helping businesses, nonprofits, and public agencies to develop staff development and training systems. From 7 years creating a full training program at Veritable Vegetable, through season-long warehouse training design at mid-sized food hubs, to many quick diagnosis and fix-it performance evaluation projects with smaller organizations, she has seen a lot. She knows how essential thoughtful and cleanly implemented HR systems are to food-focused organization success. Peggy, thanks for joining us today, and please take it away.
Thank you all for being here. I'm delighted to be joining you for the third part of our outcomes-based HR, and appropriately for the last of the three, it's looking at evaluation. We looked at outcome-based job descriptions first, and then we looked at training. And when I went to be planning this, I was thinking about evaluation as being evaluation of the staff person and also evaluation of the training. But it seemed like from the feedback that we got and what you all were talking about that you'd like to focus on the evaluation of the staff person. So that's what we'll be doing today. I have lots of information on evaluation of training, and we can either talk about that in the office hours or at another time, like on the one-on-one or something, if you're interested in that. So as an overview of what I'd like to share with you today in fair and effective evaluation, a little bit about reasons not to do evaluations, then reasons to do evaluations, which generally fall in two areas under performance and retention. Principles and strategies for fair and effective evaluation. What are the key principles? And it's important to pay attention to the variety among organizations, which you all know well, because there's so many within just our food systems work, that there isn't a one-size-fits-all. There are lots of different formats and strategies for doing evaluations. There are some principles, I certainly believe, and in my experience for doing them well, but it's not like we have one form that I can give you today that says use this one and everything will be well. I do have some examples, and they're different because the roles of the people being evaluated are different and the organizations are different. A crew member, an education program coordinator, and also a manager. And then I wanted to end with some really interesting, maybe, I think, quirks and radical ideas. So many people are dissatisfied with the evaluation format that's being used in their organization that lots of people have come up with some very different ways of looking at it. And we'll just kind of touch a little bit within those. I'm not advocating for any of them, but they're just some interesting thoughts. So the first piece, and hopefully you're all there with me on that we don't do evaluations just because it's policy or people expect it. Those tend to be very rote evaluations. People sort of dread them, both the supervisors and the people that are being evaluated, because it's just something where you just got to get it done. Sometimes they don't object to it so much because it's tied to a raise and we have to do it so that we get a raise. But again, that has its drawbacks if that's the only reason that you're doing evaluations of staff people. One of the worst reasons, and I've seen it happen a few different times, is because we weren't doing evaluations of this person and now we've decided that the person isn't doing a good job and now we want to fire him or her. So we're going to do an evaluation. And that's probably the worst reason of all to do one. However, there is a really good reason to do evaluations. And I think it's one of the key principles of why I recommend to people certainly that they do set up some kind of an evaluation system. And that's because if you have evaluation, you're really kind of completing the circle of your partnership between the staff and the manager and also the organization, so that you're all working together and knowing where you're going to achieve the outcomes for the organization and also to support professional development. I think we all know that most people in their jobs want to do good work and that they want to develop. And so by looking at where they've been, what they've been able to do, what they've learned, what they've achieved, then you can start thinking about what they can do next. So back just for a quick review, the system for training and development that I teach people and have worked out over many of these years, as Andrew says, I've seen so many things, has as its framework these 5 different pieces: the outcomes, competencies, which are tasks and much more specific information that support outcomes, training, of course, we talked about that last week, the application of the training within the workplace, and then an evaluation. So all those pieces should be in place if you're going to have a robust and really effective system for training and development. It's clear to me that evaluation has to be set up from the beginning. That if you just do all these other things and then you say, oh yeah, we've got to evaluate, you lose some of the power of doing all those other things, all the value that you can get from it. So how does it start at the very beginning? When you're hiring somebody, we worked on writing job descriptions that list outcomes. So right there at the beginning, as somebody's coming in, even in the job announcement that happens first, you see what are the outcomes, what are we about, what good things are happening in our community because we're doing this work. So that brings people in and says, here's what we're doing. And if I'm taking a job in an education program, or if I'm taking a job in a warehouse or as a truck driver, here's really the part that my area, my function plays in making sure that the good things happen. And then in the job description, you've got some specifics of here are the things that I'll be doing myself in order to help those outcomes happen. While training, I really believe in sharing outcomes and competencies with staff people and volunteers. When they're coming on board, let them know what these things are that we're about doing, the good work that we're doing in the community, and also let's make sure that you know what are the competencies, the specifics that you need to do to go forward and do these things. I made a note here about essential competencies just to point out that as you're setting things up, you want to know what are some things that your people need to know and be able to do, and you need to see that right at the very beginning of their work with you. And if you don't see those things, that's the time to part company, not keep people on, hope that they'll learn it. You know, there's a few essentials, and we can certainly talk about that more as we go forward. Your job description is really your overall reference document for your evaluation. So that's what you're going to have with you when you're evaluating somebody. The outcomes, we focused most in the last couple of webinars on the task outcomes. So doing the things that you have to do in order to, on the front lines, make the work get done. There's also core and management outcomes. Core ones I talked about a little bit last time, I think. They're the things that it doesn't matter what your role is within the organization. This is an outcome that you have a part of. So this one is mentioning health and safety of staff, volunteers and visitors protected at all time. Whether you're a receptionist, a warehouse worker, the CEO, the executive director, you're responsible for that in some extent. The management ones, and here's a statement of a management outcome that would be people visit our market, they find it welcoming, that's an outcome. The management outcome of it is that the manager manages people in order for that to happen. Staff people or volunteers. So let's look at the first one. The first one that I have here as an example is a crew member evaluation. This is including, it's very straightforward. It's usually for a frontline kind of a position. It's going to be very detailed. It's going to have outcomes for task and core. And here's a sample. When I said there are competencies, this is a page that I work with people on that we're not having time to do in the webinars, but working with people or organizations on setting up the competencies which are written for the staff person to then achieve the outcomes. So the outcome here is filling orders, building pallets, right? Those good things have to happen. If you're going to do that, if you're a worker, then you have to have certain beliefs, understandings, and things you're able to do in order to make those happen. One of the things I'd like you to really focus on is on the third column where it says, how measured, what did you see? One of the most important things for evaluation, also for training, is what does this look like when it's done well? So that you can justify, it makes sense when you say, here's how we need you to pull this product. Here's how we need you to educate these family members that come to our education program, those kinds of things. What does it look like? It's not just someone's off-the-cuff opinion of this is how it should be done. So you get those written down. And this takes those outcomes and competencies and translates them into a very chart-like kind of an evaluation form. So again, one format, one strategy, not the best one, not the worst one. It depends on your organization, your staff people, whether you choose this style. The thing that's key about it is on the very left column, you'll see there that those are the outcomes. Those are all the task outcomes for the warehouse. So they're showing up again in evaluation. The staff person who's being evaluated saw those from the very beginning. And then they rate them, they make comments. There are, on your right-hand side in the little column, or over there, there's warehouse staff evaluation by outcome. It's an Excel spreadsheet, has a lot more detail. I just couldn't put it on a slide. These here follow up. This is the second part of that evaluation. And those are your core outcomes for everybody. So everybody in this organization would have those core. And they obviously apply then to people that work in the warehouse. And they're going to be rated on how well during the period that they're being evaluated for, how well were they able to do these. At the bottom, it says you can add in some other things, improvement plans, punctuality, attendance, other kinds of things that are important to your organization. Okay. The next one that I have the example for you is the education program coordinator. And you saw some of this last week if you were with us, this Healthy Foods, Healthy Families program. So they are educating families in the setting of farmers markets about food, healthy foods and healthy families. So they've got 3 outcomes for their program, and those are documented right here. And everybody who works in this program, and they have a manager, they have staff people, they have interns, they have volunteers. Everybody is responsible for those outcomes in some way. We looked at the opening training last week for this program, which actually touched upon all 3 of these outcomes. Okay, a very different style. And again, there is a much more complete example of this where it says market staff self-evaluation on your sidebar there. It's a self-evaluation, so it's a different approach. It's giving this evaluation to the coordinator. There's a coordinator for each different market, and saying, you remember what our outcomes are. We've been working on them the whole time. Describe your experience working with us. Assess your performance in each of the 3 outcome areas. And they've got some examples that are drawn from their competencies. For example, family participation in Healthy Foods, Healthy Families is outcome number 1. Executing the program elevator pitch, engaging families at the market. Those are different competencies that they've written. And they're asking people to assess their own work at implementing those outcomes And then what would help you better understand and implement this outcome? So right there, you've got a little bit of that professional development that you all are already doing, which is great. So building people and saying, how could we make this better? How could you do better at this? Again, a different style and a format, but very workable. And again, the principles of being clear, of tying to the outcomes and competencies, and also being collaborative with the staff person as you go forward. Those principles are in place in this one as well as in the warehouse staff member. Okay? Now, the next one, managers. Managers get much more fluid when you're doing this role, both in job description and in evaluation, and of course in training, because there's a lot of flexibility, there's a lot of judgment, there's a lot of independent decision-making, depending on how your organization is set up. So it's never gonna, I would think, actually I have seen it happen, but it's not a good idea. You don't want to check off the box kind of an evaluation or job description for a manager role. It's going to include, it's going to draw from the management job description. It's going to include the task core and management outcomes, all of them. And in the job description, which is used for evaluation, I use key responsibilities for managers as opposed to sample tasks that we will use for more frontline employees, okay? It also includes goal setting very explicitly, because usually managers' role is to improve something in the organization, make something move forward. They're going to have something that they're aiming for in the next year, okay? So the next 2 pages are taken sort of straight from the job description, which is then going to be used as evaluation for the Green Acres market manager. There's a summary. Here's what the market manager and the market are about. You're going to have information on reporting to and supervising on this one. How's that lined up? And then you're going to put in at the top of this one some management, what I call management verbiage. So you might say, leads the team of 10 staff and volunteers, leads, 2 program interns, supervises whatever, in order to get these outcomes, okay? And then here's an example of that, just one piece of it. And again, there's a sample management job description and evaluation that's a little bit more full for you in the handouts. So this outcome for this market, it's the same for everybody who works in that function. So there you go. It's the people visiting the market, being welcoming, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's key responsibilities that the manager has in order to make that happen that are different from some of the other staff. And then right here, we've got the explicit goals for 2018, okay? Very quickly, times for evaluation, I would recommend at the end of initial training or sections of it. You want to get some sort of evaluation going. At 3 months is usually a good time to check. Sometimes, depending upon your organization or your state or county or whatever, there will be a 3-month after you hire, then there's a permanent. So you want to kind of make sure you've done well with matching your staff person to your organization at 3 months. When an employee is faltering, so I don't know how many of you have experience with setting up performance improvement plans, but go back to your training, go back to your job description, evaluate, point out, here's what we trained on, here's what's not happening. That's where your documentation of even the informal kind of, notes of things, that will be helpful for you. And then I'd say annually, that makes sense. Once a year, at least something that's somewhat annual, something that's somewhat more formal. Now, those are all my principles of what it's about. Collaborative, organized, clear. Here's just a real quick snippet of the Quirks and Radical Ideas. This is a book. It's a fairly old book at this point. Very interesting, basically saying these don't work. You shouldn't do them at all. But actually, when I read the book, what they said was you shouldn't do them the way most companies are doing them, most organizations are doing them, because they're judgmental, not collaborative. It really is hard to evaluate individual performance because everybody works with others. Appraisals and raises being tied together, we can talk about in office hours, but there's some real reasons not to tie them. And having to do with both the staff person and the budget. And then that question of merit raises and cost of living, all of those muddy the waters in evaluation. Really interesting stuff about what motivates people. And this Daniel Pink, who has a lot of famous books and things out there, you know, what does it mean to be the supervisor and the employee? You know, who holds the reward, for example, the raise, the power dynamics, those are important, I think, for us to pay attention to as we're going through an evaluation and in just our workday lives. And then finally, some people had brought up, actually at the training I did at the conference on being a co-op. And this is a very delightful and funny book about co-ops and kind of a collective process gone awry. And it's very interesting for group process, and particularly if you're trying to set up a collective co-op sort of organization for yourself, which has a whole different style than manager and employee, okay? So the final bit, fair and effective evaluation. We know it's not easy, can be very much an uphill battle. And my best guidance is to be as clear and collaborative as possible and to stay on that path, which those 5 pieces of effective staff development and training and evaluation system. Best wishes.